Hello everyone, welcome back to another video of Automation Testing Insider. So this is part 15 of API testing series, and today we are going to talk about API chaining. So what do you mean by API chaining, correct? So first we'll understand the concept of API chaining, and later on I'll show you some examples using Postman tool so that you can understand better. So let's get started. So whenever you work on any project, API projects, so we used to send different HTTP requests, correct? So let me give an example. So let's say this is request 1. We are sending through an API and we are getting some response 1. Similarly, we have request 2. We are sending, getting some response. Request 3. We are getting some response. Similarly, a number of requests we have. So this is what we are sending the request. This is the simple concept of an API. So when we send the request, we are getting some response. Correct? And we have different HTTP requests and using different HTTP methods like get, post, put, delete, right? So these are the different HTTP methods which we used to send the request. Now what happens, what do you mean by API chaining? Here is the concept of API chaining. So when we send the request, we are getting some response, and in that response we are getting some data, correct, in the response body of this particular request. So what we are going to do in the second request 2, we are using some part of data from response 1. So we are using some part of data from response 1 to the request second, to the second request, correct. Similarly, some part of response from request 2 we are going to use for the request 3, similarly for other request as well. So there is a dependency between the different HTTP requests, or we can say dependency among a number of HTTP requests. So why we are doing this? So to create the, or to increase the reusability, correct. So let's say we are getting here, let's say this particular request is post request, which creates record in the database for students. So for student, like we have student ID, name, and some other subjects and all. These are the different fields we have for a particular student record. So we are sending the request, post request, and it creates it creates a record in the database, correct. So we'll get the same response over here, like student ID, name, and if you have roll number or subject, etc. So what we are going to do, let's say in the request 2 we are going to use student ID. So what we are going to do, student ID will store in a variable from this response and use that in second request. We'll pass that ID to second request, so that no need to rewrite that ID in this particular request in the second request. Let's say this is get request, or let's say put request. So we need to write some body, right, to update the record. So we'll keep that ID from response 1. Similarly, we'll do some dependency, we'll create some dependency among different HTTP requests. So this is just an example how we create the dependency. So this is nothing but the chaining of different HTTP requests. So it's like a chain. Like all API requests are interconnected with each other. So that is nothing but the API chaining. And we'll understand this concept using two ways. I'll show you two APIs. One is local API, which we have already created, like our own API, which we are going to discuss today. And the second one through a remote API. Remote API or some real APIs are there for testing purpose. Remote APIs, using that we'll understand the concept of API chaining. So let's understand this. So here my Postman is already open here. So if you remember guys, own API, I have already created some request. If you remember, let me show you. I think part 8 I have created a video, create your own APIs for testing. So you can refer this video so you can understand this concept of how to create our own APIs. So simply what I'll do, I'll just copy, I'll create the same collection again, and then we'll reuse, we'll update those requests and use for this API chaining example. Okay. So how to copy this, right? So at collection level, so we have 3 dots here, and we have an option over here, duplicate. So click on this duplicate. So you can, here you can see this duplicate got created. We have another copy. I think this is the old one. This is, we have not this one. Yeah, this is the latest one. So let me just rename it, otherwise we'll get confused. I'll give the name API chaining. So it comes on top. So these are the different requests which we have created. This is our local API address, correct? So using that, we'll create the different requests, right? So this get request, post, patch, delete, and get. Get is another there. I can delete this. So we'll use 4. Now, how to run this local API, correct? So because server is on my system only, so what we'll do, we have to you should have a JSON file which we have created in part 8. If you can see, create your own API. I have explained how to create your JSON file and how to run the JSON server, right? So cmd and JSON -server, and what is the name of your JSON file. This is how you can run, and press enter. So now this is running. Now our API will work. If you send the request, get request, let me send it, you will get the response. Now you can see we got the response 200. Okay. So these are the different requests we have for different employees, correct? Now what we are going to do, we'll use get request, post request. So for post request we use body, right? So I'll put it on top. Post request, first we'll create the record. And later on we'll use the ID from that post request to the get request, and then we'll update the request, and lastly we'll delete that record. So how to do that? So for post request, let's say let me show you how many records we have currently. 30 records are there. Now let's see whether it is working or not. So ID 14, I'll create some record like John and status true. These are the different fields, guys, for this particular employees table, employees data, ID, name, and status. So let me send this. This is simple post request, so I'm sending it. So it will create a record in the database 201 created, correct? Now if I go to get request and using this URL, if I send it, we'll get the record. Let me show you. Like this, we get the record like 14, ID 14, John, this one. If you want particular record, so /14, send it, we'll get the record, this the one which we have created, correct? So this is how it is working. Now what we are going to do for post request, so let me send this 15 and John 1. Let's make it false. So this is new record which I'm going to create. Now what we are going to do, we'll create the post request. So the record will be added in the database in the employees table, correct? Now using test, after once our request gets executed, we'll store the response, correct? We'll store the ID and we'll use that ID in the next request, which is get request. Similarly, we'll use the ID in the next request, next to next, like patch request, and later on delete, correct? This is how we are going to do. Yeah, let's use put instead of patch. Save it. Yeah, post, get, put and delete. Hope you understand the concept. So first we'll send the request, post request. It will create the record in the database, and then from that ID will capture in test. So test will be executed after the request gets completed, correct? Whereas pre-request will be executed before sending the request. So we have to write some JavaScript in this test tab, correct? So what JavaScript we are going to write, what we are going to do? So basically the response which we are going to get, we need to store that response, and a particular let's say suppose we are going to use reuse ID, so we'll store that in a variable. If you want to get from that response data name, then we can retrieve the name or status as well. So we are going to use ID. So how we are going to do that? So JSON dot parse, and we are going to use the response body. This is the keyword response body. So using this we'll get the response bodies. We need to store in a variable, correct? So this is JavaScript, simple JavaScript, and we'll store in a variable. Let's say JSON data. I'll store in a variable called JSON data. Now what we are going to do using JSON data, we have all the records, right? So what we are going to use here in the JSON data, ID. We are going to use ID. We are going to retrieve the ID from student, correct? Now what we'll do, we need to create the variable, correct? So pm dot environment variable, we'll create the variable pm dot environment. I'll show you why I'm going to create this set, and it takes two parameters, the variable name and the value. So variable name I'm going to use like ID and comma this JSON dot ID which I want, correct? So I'll put it over here like this. So this particular line will create the record in the environment variable, which is nothing but the ID. So this will create the environment variable. Anything missing over here? Like so first line will create the variable of JSON data from the response body. It will create the JSON data, and from that JSON data, the JSON data we need only ID. So JSON dot ID. So this is the key and this is the value. So it will create an environment variable, right? So let me just save it. So this part is done. Now next part, what we are going to do, when this will execute this post request, after once request has been executed, after that test will run and this will execute, right? So this will create the environment variable. So ID will be created here in this environment variable. So here we have global variable, and here environment variable will be created. I'll show you how it works, and later on get request, right? So let me just write some test as well inside this test tab to assert something. We can write like assertion 1, and we have some library pm dot test, correct? And inside that, what we are going to verify, test the status code is 201, correct? And we'll use function. We can use either function or we have arrow function, right? So here I am using simply function, and here I'll write pm dot response dot to have status, right? So here the expected value we write what we are expecting, 201. So let me just save it. So I have written just one assertion over here. This is, we have already spoken about how we put the assertion in our test. So this is the assertion, and now coming to the GET request, what we are going to do, we are going to use the ID. So suppose we want that particular ID, the ID which we are getting from here in the environment variable, we are going to use in the here, right, in the URL. So how to use that? Slash double curly braces and use the ID over here. Now it will give an error currently like unresolved variable, because this variable has not been created yet, because we have not executed this post request. So this will give the particular, like this will give the particular ID here, and it will execute this request. Now here also let's write some test. So I'll just simply copy this assertion and put it over here. Here we'll get 200 record, right? 200 OK. 200 message will get, OK message will get when we execute this particular test like GET request. So this is done. Similarly for patch request, I'll put the same thing here, ID, and we'll use some body from here. I'll copy this. Let's say in this put request, I'll just rename put request. Let's say the particular ID, let's say we are going to update the name and this status. So let's say true. I'm going to update true. So just save it. So here also we'll pass the ID and delete requests. There will not be any body. So here simply we'll use the ID. Now let's see if anything is there in the response. So let me clear it before executing it. So everything is done, guys. We have created everything like post request, post, get, put and delete. Now let me simply run this collection. So when you come to at collection level, and here we have 3 dots, and you'll get run collection. So this is the order is important. So first post will create the record, and then get, put and then delete. So let me run this run API chaining collection. Now here you can see everything is executed successfully. Get request, why the test has not been executed? I think we did not save this, that's the reason. But anyway, let me run it again. I'll clear the console again. I'll run it again. Now here you can see. So 2 tests are there. One is inside a post request, another one inside a get request. So you can see here post request successfully got executed, and the test result, the code is OK. Second one is the test status code is 200 for get request. Code is no test found. There is no test inside this, but we got the record, we got the response as 200, and the last delete one is 200. Now let's have a look through console. So post request we have sent, and let's see we have request body over here. So this is the requested body, like ID 15 John 1 false, correct? And what is the response we got? Same response we should get, right? So 15 John 1 false. Now if you see the gate, how it is picking up in the response body of gate, we got 15 John 1 and false. Now coming to put, to update the record, here we have response body John 2 true and ID is 15. This is the response body of, we have updated already name and status, right, in the put request. And lastly delete, we don't get any response body in the delete, correct? So this is how it is executed. And so hope it is clear for you guys how we are going to do that. So in the test we have stored the variable, correct? We have stored in the JSON data in the form of variable, and then we have created an environment variable. So if you see this icon here, uh, environment variable. So here id has been created 15, current value is 15. Now let's do one more thing. In the delete request, how to delete that id. So here you can see we have created the id, this environment variable, right? So how to delete this? So that also we have seen in earlier classes, earlier videos which we have created. So in the how to delete that, so just come to this test tab in the delete request and simply write pm dot environment dot unset. How to unset that, right? And similarly, simply you need to put here what is the id. Now what is the environment variable? So this is the environment variable id. So save it and simply run it again. So let me send it again. Sorry, let me clear all the console, and from I'll run the API collection. So run collection API chaining. Something went wrong while running your script. Check Postman console for more information. What happened? Duplicate ID. I think it is duplicate ID. So this time I think we need to keep 16 because 15 is already created. So let's keep it like 16. So this will work. We'll give some other name like Alvin. Save it. Get is fine. ID. Put delete and pm dot environment dot unset will unset the ID. Hope everything is fine now. Run collection. Now here you can see everything is executed successfully. Correct? This is the previous one. After that you can see 201, 200, 200, 200. So everything got executed successfully. Let me run it again. This time I think it should work because 15 is already been created. So now you can see after executing this test, right? After executing this request, delete request, and this test tab will be executed. So it will it will unset the ID environment variable. So here you can see the ID has been deleted from here. Now if you can try to run it again, you can run it multiple times. Now you can see here 201, 200, 200, 200. So all got successfully executed. Here you can see 200. And we have two tests, one from post request, another one is from get request. So this is all about today, guys. And in the next video, using Go REST API, like I'll show you some remote APIs as well. How we can achieve this API chaining. So we'll understand in the next video. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Bye bye.